Hi, everybody. Welcome to the third Invisibilities conversation at Acogedor. I am Nicole Rademacher. I'm the founder and director of this space that's moved online. Acogedor is an intimate space. It used to take place before COVID times in my front yard, and so now I've been doing virtual programming. So this series is really looking at how people are marginalized, so our different invisibilities, so things that people don't see that can kind of put us in the other category, or we're not acknowledged for different oppressions that may happen in microaggressions. For this installment, we have Toban Nichols. Say hi, Toban. Kristine Schomaker. Say hi.
Hello.
And Neena Wang.
Hi.
We'll be talking about body image, how the body is perceived by this heteronorm Western society. But before we get started, I wanted to say one thing. So this is the third in the series, and I had ones planned for January, February, and March of 2021, but I'm gonna have to take a hiatus for my own personal mental health issues. We will be back. I'm just not sure when, so stay tuned. I put the link to our mailing list in the chat on the YouTube, so please sign up there and we will let you know when the Invisibility conversations will pick back up and any other programming that'll happen. Also, thinking about mental health, I just want to make sure that I am ethical because anything that's discussed today that deals with mental health is an individual's lived experience. It's not meant to be medical advice or psychiatric or psychological advice. If you are thinking of hurting yourself or others, there's the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. And if you're in immediate danger, please dial 911. And I guess to make the segue between mental health and body image, I invite and either or any of the three of you to talk about how body image has, how it deals with your own personal mental health. Oh, I'm sorry, hold on. What am I thinking? First, I need everybody to introduce themselves, and then we'll go into the conversation. So Toban, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole. My name is Toban Nichols. I'm a visual artist and a filmmaker. I live in Los Angeles and have lived here for the last 10 years. And I'm currently in post-production on my first feature-length documentary film, which has posed a lot of mental health problems, actually, along the way.
Interesting. Oh, I want to hear more about that. Kristine, can you please give us a little taste of who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this, Nicole. I'm honored to be here, especially with Nicole, or with Neena and Toban also. So I'm Kristine Schomaker. I'm a multidisciplinary artist, and I run Shoebox PR, which is a support network for artists. I also am the founder and publisher for Art and Cake, an online art magazine, and I run Shoebox Projects, which is an alternative art space which has gone online during COVID. I'm a curator, and I kind of dip my toes in a lot of different things in the art world. But it's all about supporting artists in many, many different ways, and a lot of it is about mental health. So this is a perfect conversation for all of us to be having in many different ways also. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristine. All right, Neena, you're up.
Hi, my name is Neena Wang. I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. Went to school for undergraduate bachelor's degree in St. Louis and now live in Los Angeles. I'm a multimedia artist. So I tend to wear a lot of hats. I have background in fine arts and architecture, museum curation, gallery curation. Just during COVID, I've done some styling, some production design. Right now I'm focusing on ceramics and painting. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, now I'll throw you guys out into the deep end. And let's talk about body and body image and mental health.
Oh gosh, where do we start? um, you know, we've talked about it previously that body image is a major part of my work. My my own artwork and just my life in general. I'm plus size, I'm curvy, and for a while, my artwork was also my therapy, trying to work through ideas of what it means to live in a plus size body, to be a plus size person in this world, to just have the feelings behind it. And so I just kind of jumped, like ran with that, and through my art tried to figure out, or I don't know, tried to work through many different issues, through photography, through curation, through painting or sculpture, or many different things. And I know we had talked about, my most recent project was called Perceive Me, where I invited 60 artists to paint, draw, photograph, sculpt, videotape, and draw me nude. And it was all about the idea that oftentimes our own perception is taken from how we imagine others see us. Which, thinking about it, it's like thinking about invisibility. There's like so many different layers to that, being invisible in the world. But for a long time it was about, it was personally about me learning to love my body, but it also became universal in working to help others accept who they are also. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably a good starting point.
That's definitely a good starting point, Kristine. And I think when Nicole paired us all up together for this, and we talked about what sort of the themes were, I thought, oh, Kristine is perfect for this, like because of your Perceive Me project. It is so much about vulnerability and sort of blasting ego and all of those sorts of things. And I think I said this to you before, I think it was just incredible that you were so willing to do this. It's I hate the word brave. I think it's such an overused word, but it is really such, like, just to allow people to view you and perceive you and interpret you into their own work is already sort of an act of vulnerability in a way. And then to be able to do it to anyone that's nude, not just you but anyone. I mean, that is the ultimate sort of like way people are judged in the world, and the thing that I think especially Americans are most scared about is being naked in front of people. And it's just, I just find it incredible that you made this idea of Perceive Me into this thing that's gone, you've had, I think, 3 different shows specifically about perceiving you. And it's just, it's really mind-boggling to me in a lot of ways.
Thank you. Just the idea, I mean, I don't want to say I've consciously felt invisible in the world, but, through history, well, not history, I don't even want to say that, but through my lifetime, being plus size, I'm sure I could have had more opportunities if I wasn't plus size. So being looked over, for many different things. And even aside from Perceive Me, like one of the reasons that, or I think even when Nicole had invited me to be part of this and asked us like for a paragraph, I put like dating, I mean, dating was my biggest, just being invisible and looked over, because in our society, sadly, looks and how you look is like the first impression for people. And, that's my perception of it anyway. But so like thinking about that, and I talk about that even in my art, that throughout my life, I've only been asked out on dates a few times. And I know, it's much more complicated than that. But in my mind, my you know, um, surrounding, the anxiety and, living in this plus size body and, and feeling unattractive. And, you know, through my mind, the reason why I haven't been asked out is because, of my body. And, I'm smart enough to know that I wouldn't even want to date somebody if that was their first thing anyway. But so, using it in my art, kind of, I mean, part of it was just a way to become like visible, putting myself out there visibly, both publicly and privately or personally. Definitely.
Yeah, I think this is such a cool topic to talk about with other artists. This idea of invisibility and the body. Like, there's a reason why we call it like an artist's body of work, right? Like, because their artwork is such a reflection of themselves. And we sort of like, I feel like artists are just so open to all of the, just like everything, all of the darkness and light. And they're just so much more vulnerable, and they choose not to like filter out the world around them as much as maybe like non-artists or whatever. And because of that, like I feel that art is like both my therapy and also like my source of like trauma and poor mental health. And both in like looking at your own work, you sort of feel like you're always holding a mirror up to yourself, whether it's your physical body or your spirit or soul. And even looking at other people's work, you sort of feel that you're also looking at a mirror, and you open yourself up to all of the emotions and stories, whether it's good or bad, of yourself and other people. So yeah, for me, I would say like art is sort of like a counter to being invisible. Like if you feel invisible in some areas of your life, you want to kind of like narrate your own visibility. You choose to like make yourself visible through your work rather than just yourself.
Yeah,
Thanks, Neena. That actually goes along with one of the questions that came in from our live viewing audience.
Hey.
Yeah, Lena Crown or Lena Crown. She was curious specifically with Neena and Toban if you feel aware of your bodies while you're making your ceramics or your filmmaking, and if so, how.
Go ahead, Neena. Go first.
Definitely with ceramics. I mean, it's such a bodily experience. I feel like throwing at a wheel is such a fun therapy, and it's so like a direct translation of how you're feeling at the time. If I'm feeling anxious or having a bad day, I just literally cannot throw an object to save my life. And it's such a great just like awareness practice. People say like throwing is meditation. I definitely feel that. And I just think of each piece as like a body, like, each pot is in itself like a vessel that you like create and shape and then fire and paint over. And yeah, I think it's like such a one-to-one like body art to finished vessel. Like you can see their hands on it.
I think that's interesting. I sort of feel partially the opposite of that. I think, a lot of my art doesn't involve me being in it, and then some of it does, and I'm not super comfortable with my own body. I'm not super comfortable as an artist being, sort of public. I think that's part of the invisibility, is that I think in general artists sometimes prefer to be sort of invisible and let their art do the talking for them. And I definitely feel that way. But one of the things that when you asked the question, Lena and Nicole, what it made me think is that, well, if I'm behind the camera, then I'm not aware of my body. I'm not aware. I'm only aware of what's happening outside of this view. And I feel the same way when I'm making something physical or, making something in general, that it's sort of like the focus doesn't have to be on me and on my body at that time. I think, I often I get in, sort of obsessive cycles about myself and about thinking about myself and judging myself a lot. That's one of my big issues. My therapist could inform you on if she was able to, is that I judge myself constantly, and sort of the making of art is a way not to do that. I'm focused on the making and using those tools that I've been given as an artist to make this work. So it's not focused inward, it's focused outward, trying to make this thing. And I appreciate that. I think that's sort of one of the best parts about it, is that our art is ultimately about ourselves and our lived experiences and how we walk through the world. But you can make your art so that it is about something else as well, and it's not sort of focused on you. And that's what I like about it. I really go through a lot of cycles of sort of being obsessed with myself and then chastising myself about it, and trying to think of other ways to get around that sort of that vanity. I think it's something that especially as a gay man, I think vanity is something that exists in the lives of a lot of gay men, and they have to navigate all the time, and it's something that can be easily abused and used against others. And so those are things that I often think about, and they're things that bother me. They sort of feel like really global issues in some ways. They're bigger than I can handle. But sorry to getting off topic a little bit, but yes, my focus is usually not on me when I'm making art, and I'm thankful for that.
Mm-hmm. It's almost though like as you're practicing some form of art or creating something, whether it's by yourself or with other people, you almost like expand your concept of the body beyond just like this physical body, right? Like I feel that as artists, and also just like with our identities, like to be fluid in identity and practice, you can like expand and contract your idea of the body. So maybe if I'm working on a film with a team and a group of people, you really do feel that you are like part of this greater body, and that you're like going to birth this film from this like larger team of people.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead, Kristine.
No, have either of you created self-portraits through your different mediums? And like, did you have a different conception of the body because of that, maybe?
When I was younger, when I was learning to paint, in school, learning to paint, one of the things they teach you to do, the way you learn to paint, is by painting yourself and drawing yourself. And so I have a lot of self-portraits from those days, those younger days. And I pulled them out not too long ago. I think it was last year. I pulled them out and sort of took a good hard look at them, and I thought, boy, that doesn't even look like me. This is the first thing I thought. That doesn't look like you. You were really making yourself look a lot better than you did. But yeah, I don't, even when I appear in my own videos now, or some sort of performance, I don't see that as a self-portrait, because I don't think I can. I don't think I could. I don't have any desire to be myself on camera. I desire to be somebody else. I think in order to be able to perform, what I have to do is step out of myself and be somebody else. Otherwise, I think I would be petrified. And so yeah, I haven't delved into self-portraiture in the last probably 20 years.
Okay, I'm going to jump in again from another question, actually follows along this thread as well. Monica Marks asks, how has creating and showing your art in isolation during the pandemic, or being seen only over a screen, changed or affected how you view your own body, and then also your own body of work?
Well, something that I think it might have been you, Nicole, I'm not sure who taught me this trick, but someone said, like, when you're on Zoom, turn off your camera. And I've started doing that, and I think that's amazing. It's so freeing, because I can't tell you how many Zoom meetings I sat in staring at myself, and you're sort of trying to pay attention to what people are saying, what people are doing, or looking at their backgrounds, but really you're just staring at yourself a lot. And that's been incredibly helpful, because I don't need that sort of obsession in my life when you're trying to get things done. and also I have enjoyed sort of being able to be online more than in public. I think, you know, I don't always have the easiest time in public. I can be sort of shy and reserved, and you know, especially when it comes to like art openings or things like that, especially my own art openings, I often don't want to go, um, because I would rather stay home. So, you know, in that way, this sort of like online environment we're now living through has been a little bit of a boon, really, um, at least for me. What about you guys?
Neena, did you want to?
Yeah, I think it's sort of like what I was saying before, being so isolated physically and trapped in a physical environment has like really got me thinking about who I am, like outside of physicality. Like, you know, my digital presence or footprint is also like part of my identity. My like the connections that I have to other people that are maybe far away is also part of my identity. You know, my website's part of my identity. My artwork is part of my identity. So like in a time where we can't express ourselves like face to face and with like direct contact, I think we're finding really creative ways to express ourselves, whether it's through a phone call, Zoom, or a painting, or just some kind of like message in a digital bottle that you throw out there.
I think for me, oh, I'm sorry, Tobin.
No, I was just saying I like that idea. I like the
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kristine.
When the, you know, I like my Perceive Me exhibition opened January 25th and it closed February 21st. So it was like right before the pandemic. We took down the show, it was going to travel, and then all of that was canceled. And so, and I was relieved. It was like, I'm like, it's going to, you know, come back in like next summer. But, and then I'm like, you know, I don't want to focus on my body right now. I realized that like I needed to actually focus on it through therapy and through, I started Overeaters Anonymous, and, you know, through actually getting healthy. And rather than using art to do it, I needed to like do it for myself. And so um, I wasn't going to do any art related to the body. And then early on, you know, in like March and April, the pandemic, it was just, you know, I spent a lot of time in bed. I was binging on like British murder mysteries, and like I'd have like drawing paper in bed, and I do use a lot of dots and circles in my art. And so I was doing a series called My Imaginary Wall, which also is very psychological, because I talk about like this wall in my head that is stopping me from doing things that I'm having a hard time breaking through. And so that became the art. And it's interesting because I haven't gotten back into the studio to paint. And when I paint, I use my body. Like the canvas or the panels are on the floor, and I pour and drip, and I haven't even done that to get physical with my body. Only recently I started using my body a little more, doing a call and response thing. But yeah, it has been hard, especially like, you know, putting on like those COVID-19 pounds or whatever they say, and working through that, and, you know, just all of the emotions going on with what we're all dealing with during the pandemic. It's really hard on top of, you know, dealing with our art. Definitely.
Yeah, I think we all have so much time to just sit with ourselves and contend with ourselves, and we don't have other people around. We're just like diving deep within our souls. I feel like this has been such a journey of self-discovery, and also I feel like it's made me realize how much almost everything I make is a form of a self-portrait, even if it's not intentional. I'm thinking about the last panel that Nicole we did for Acogedor. I showed a painting of my bathroom, and I just feel like I'm that toilet in the painting. Like that, like even things I'm working on now, whether it's ceramics or right now I'm working on painting of a burning building, I just see myself in it so much.
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about what we were just talking about as far as like kind of being invisible behind the camera or as the artist or through performance. You know, just kind of what you were saying, Tobin, about, yeah, being, you know, when you're in front of the camera, you're acting. And a lot of my art's about that also. You know, it's definitely performative where, you know, I'm definitely disconnected from, you know, the thoughts and feelings in my head and like actually acting and, you know, doing something that way. And I don't know, that invisibility, you know, that's just a way of hiding, you know, and yeah, it's really fascinating to think about.
Yeah, the concept of hiding is something that is sort of, you know, I think people perceive hiding, the idea of hiding, to be sort of a negative thing, and maybe it has some of that connotation, but I think that is something that is essential in many ways to sort of my well-being. It's like, you know, I have a need to be isolated and hidden and away and inaccessible in a lot of ways, and I've heard that sort of thrown at me before. You know, people who are friends of mine that want to do something and then, you know, say I'm being flaky or I'm being weird or I, you know, or they haven't seen me in such a long time, and it's sort of like, well, you know, that's my thing, and it's, and people don't often understand that. It's, you know, it's hard for them to understand, especially if it's something fun or we're gonna go have drinks, it's gonna be so fun, and it's sort of like, no, I just need to really like not be available right now, you know, especially mentally. I'm easily overwhelmed by situations, and especially in groups of people, and so, you know, that sort of like turtle shrinking back into the shell is I think essential, really, in a sort of a mental health way. And that also made me, when we were talking about sort of, you know, the way we've all had to isolate this year and sort of turn inward, um, and really sort of figure ourselves out and having to be alone. I think people, it's been hard for people that I know for a fact from, you know, friends, that it's been hard for people who don't like themselves or don't like to be alone to be so isolated. You know, it's really maddening in that way. And I guess I sort of counted myself lucky in that way. It's like, well, I enjoy being alone, and I like being at home, and you know, I like being with just me and my dog. And so, you know, it's sort of been, oh, you know, 2020, oh, lucky me, 2020. But you know, I think it's really terrible for a lot of people. I have, like I said, a few friends that earlier in the year I really realized they were having a very much harder time than I was, and it was because they were home alone and we weren't allowed to go anywhere or see anyone or touch anyone, and it was just something I had not considered would affect people so much, but it does. And it's especially the touch aspect. We all, you know, it's been so hard not to have physical contact in your life for almost a year. It's really, it's just, you know, sometimes the space around us becomes deafening in that way because of the lack of those things. And I think before all of this, before, you know, the pandemic happened, it seemed like, you know, those were things I was taking for granted. You know, like, it's just, it has, getting back to the what we're talking about, it does seem like that has been a big, huge lesson this year, is just sort of like getting to know yourself. Do you like yourself? Do you not? Can you change it? You know, what are you going to do? It's sort of that sort of way of moving through the world now that we're faced with.
Yeah, I think we're reminded of the importance of being seen and how being seen is such a part of the human experience. There were times, you know, in the darkest times of the quarantine when I was really depressed and alone, and just you feel totally invisible. You feel like, well, not a human being's not seen my face in maybe 5 days. So like, if I were to just fade off the face of the earth, like, would anyone even notice? You know, you just, when you're only seeing yourself and nobody is reflecting themselves back onto you, you just feel totally invisible. I think this time has been such a time of being invisible. And also, like, I don't know, I'm really interested in the turn towards the digital that we're all doing now and like the possibilities of that. Kristine, I was looking at your avatar artwork, your projects. I thought that was really cool and really relevant to this. Is like that idea of creating an avatar for yourself that's like detached from your physical body, you know, that's almost like a potential reality that we could all be living in, is having second avatars online that are uninhibited by like the way we were born, our race that we were born into, you know, like the way we look, our body type, and what an interesting like experience that would be. Like, how would we build our identities if we were able to just like freely manipulate our bodies all the time?
You know, that's my master's thesis was about that. It was called My Life as an Avatar. And I'm still in Second Life is the program that I used, but I don't go in there that much. But in the early days, and from 2006 until like 2010, 2012, I was in quite a bit. I had so many friends that were gay and came out for the first time in Second Life because they felt they could be themselves where they couldn't in real life. It was amazing. You know, people who were trans or, you know, and hadn't transitioned yet, you know, I mean, different, you know, I mean, everything you could think of, creating an avatar that, you know, that's like a wolf avatar. You know, you don't even have to worry about who you are in real life. And so, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, like the idea of the physical invisibility versus like the psychological invisibility. And, you know, there's something there too that the avatar was able to do. For me, like that's one thing that really prompted working on body image with my work is like I went into the painting program at Cal State Northridge, and my professor, Samantha Fields, had asked, okay, well, tell me about Second Life. Why is your avatar this tall, thin, beautiful blonde woman, you know? And she didn't say I'm not, but you know, compared to who I am in real life. And so I really started to look at that. And, you know, I even like kind of expanded it and did a project called 1,000 Avatars, where I shot actually 2,000 avatar portraits to just talk about identity and why we create these personas that we do. And at the time, like the movie Surrogates came out, I think that's the one with Bruce Willis. Yeah. There were like 2 or 3 that came out where it was like the real person that, you know, you were like in this pod and you were like acting as another person. And then Ready Player One came out after that. And it's just, you know, these thoughts are out there and, you know, what they mean in the broader context of, you know, being who we really are versus performing versus, you know, I mean, all of that is really fascinating.
Yeah, I am familiar with your work like Neena is of that time, and I have recently purchased an Oculus. I don't know if everyone knows what that is, but because I'm delving into sort of the VR world of making art, and so the first sort of step was to get in there. And the first thing you do when you turn it on, the first thing it prompts you to do is create an avatar, and so it sort of was, you know, when I was presented with this, like, well, should I make it look like me? Like, should it be like me? I mean, you know, that was the first thought. Should it look like me? But oh wait, it doesn't have to. It can look like anything you want. It can look like anybody you want, and it's changeable, and it's sort of like, you know, that was a really weird thing to think. Well, this represents me in this environment, so does it have to look like me? You know, was my first question. And it also made me think of your work like that, because yeah, your avatar from that series certainly doesn't look like you in a lot of ways, and not just because of its size, but you know, the shape and all these sorts of things. So, you know, it's an interesting thing to think about, and also obviously another way for us to sort of be hidden or anonymous, and a way to change the way we change who we are perceived to be without sort of a lot of, you know, effort to do so.
Exactly. When I first started in Second Life, I didn't even question like you did what you know, what I could have looked like or what I wanted to look like. I knew I wanted to be thin. I wanted to have long hair. You know, I wanted to dress classy. Like I knew, which actually it's interesting. That prompted me to like, you know, thinking after Perceive Me that, you know, I was all about body positivity and fat positivity and fat activism. And it's like all of a sudden, you know, over the pandemic especially, I'm like, wait, I want to be thin. You know, I mean, I want to be healthy, and you know, it's yeah. So I mean, the more you delve into um, these ideas about identity, whether it's about, you know, size, gender, whatever it is. Um, I just read a passage earlier about learning, you know, from these different, I don't remember exactly what it said, but it was like, you know, learning from these different things that we're going through and how you can like overcome and build on them and expand on them. And um, yeah, it's just, I mean, I don't know, there's so much out there.
Yeah, it's a weird ego trip to go through, and that sort of thing. And I feel like you've been on a long journey with that, because of Second Life has, you know, been around a long time, and you did extensive work with the number of avatars you made in there. And one of the questions that came up in my head when you were talking about Second Life is, and the sort of different people that you met there and the experiences they were having that they felt they couldn't have in the real world. Have you encountered those people? Are you still friends with those people outside of Second Life? Have you found them on Facebook? They found you, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm still friends with, I mean, there's 40 or 50 people from Second Life I've met in real life, like physically, but there's still a lot that I am friends with on Facebook. Some of them I'm still friends with their avatar, so I don't even know who they are in real life still. So they're staying invisible that way. But it doesn't really matter. You know, they're still the same cool, intelligent, you know, people just with their avatar names. Um, you know, which is a whole other thing. You know, like when you even think about like what is it, like identity theft and things like that. And I mean identity in general, and you know, and anonymity. I mean, that's a huge thing, like that goes hand in hand with invisibility. You know, it's, but it doesn't matter that I don't know who they are in real life. Sometimes I'm curious, but it doesn't matter. And that's kind of the cool thing.
Was there
Yeah.
were none of them ever sort of different in person than they were online, their personalities or their shyness, anything like that?
Say that again, I'm sorry, the
What
first
you
part.
met in person, of the ones you've met in person, were there differences between their online persona and their real life persona? Were they sometimes shyer or different, or do you find them to be pretty consistently who they are?
They were pretty consistently who they are. Yeah, it, and I was too. I mean, I like, even though I looked different, my personality was the same. You know, I didn't change or act or perform in that way. But yeah, everybody was pretty consistently who they were. I stayed with several of them in England when I went to England, and you know, it was just like we were best friends and we had known each other our entire lives. It was really amazing.
It's really interesting to think about the fact that their physical self in Second Life may be different than who they are physically in real life, but that their like their actual personality and who the essence of who they are is the same, especially in regards to a comment from Monica Marks, where she said that this discussion is reminding her, or the discussion about avatars is reminding her about Carl Jung, and when he talked about the social face as a mask that is presented to the world as an impression and is used to conceal the true nature of the individual. So it's interesting that you guys are saying that the true nature of the individual is both, it's essentially the same in Second Life as in real life, but it's those avatars, those social masks.
I mean, it is. I think that goes directly to what I was saying earlier too. That quote from Carl Jung is. I mean, it's absolutely a social mask. I feel like I can't navigate the world any other way. You know, I'm comfortable with who I really am, but I also feel like that is mainly for me to know, and not always for other people to know. And so I really, really relate to that quote. I've never heard that before, but I'm so intrigued by it now because I feel that way out out in the world.
I mean, the social mask, just like, you know, even now, well, before the pandemic, going to exhibitions and you know, even on Facebook, you know, I mean, it's a social mass. Nobody knows that, I mean, until I said it here, that I was in bed binging on murder mysteries for a couple months in March and April, you know, I mean, because I was on Facebook. I was posting different things on Facebook, and, you know, and like even exhibitions, people are like, you're so busy. And it's like, I didn't feel like I was because I was in bed,
Like
but
anything actually.
I know. I know. No, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, it makes you question what is the true nature of an individual, even at all, like if without our identities, without our physical selves, you know, like maybe, I don't know, it's funny, Tobin, you said ego trip earlier. It just makes me feel that like maybe we don't have individual natures, and that's actually quite all right. Like the idea of consciousness is that we're all, you know, like one being or one body, and we're just separated by like physical barriers. But those physical barriers are very permeable, you know, like I can
Yeah.
absorb your energy, you can absorb mine, and I don't know.
Go
It
ahead.
seems like it seems so important that there's like an individual ego and that you have this sense of self, which I think it's good to build up and also like destroy, you know, like in the cycle.
Well, yeah, we should be constantly sort of destroying our egos in many ways. I mean, it's the ego is such the ego is a thing that gets so out of control, I think, and I see it happen to people, especially online and especially on Facebook. You know, anyone that gets any sort of like attention for something, they immediately will usually amplify that to, you know, this degree where it becomes really obvious and sort of, you know, tiresome and worn out. And I think that's where people's egos come into play, and they really start to drink their own Kool-Aid in a lot of ways, which I think is important not to do. And something I've certainly been a victim of doing in the past. And it's just like, you know, you can't tell anyone anything when they've drunk their own Kool-Aid. They just, it's a tough thing, the ego. It's something that really concerns me a lot of the time.
Yeah, that ego is also like just about being visible, and being visible is also tied to like your livelihood as an artist. So it's such a like fraught relationship.
Yeah, I think it's important to I think it's important as sort of like, you know, as artists, we are sort of public figures, whether we want to be or not, in sort of the same way anyone in the arts is. I mean, you know, celebrities who are actors or musicians often have a much higher profile than we do, but at the same, we're in that same sort of business where we're public people and you have to have a public persona. And it's something I was talking to my mother about the other day, just about sort of like what I put out into the world and how I am perceived by people, and what I'm putting out. I want to be positive things. I don't want to put out negative things. I want to put out positivity. I want to put out things that are helpful to people, but also, you know, express my own ideas. And that's something that's really important, is just sort of your public persona. And, you know, I mean, and it's this type of stuff that people get, you know, canceled over all the time, is like, you know, they say something stupid or they say something that, you know, people get upset about, and suddenly you know, that person is sort of gone. um, it's really a weird thing online to have to monitor what you do and say, even more than in real life, I think.
Mm.
Funny,
I think
my mom always, oh, I'm sorry.
yeah. I think it's cool that just as visual artists, you know, in comparison to maybe like actors and musicians or performers, entertainers, we do have that camouflage. Like, you really don't have to be a public persona if you don't want to be. Like, there have been so many times that I have no idea what this artist looks like, but I just, you know, intimately like know and are familiar with their work. And maybe like I'll even meet them and not even realize that that was the artist that I just met. Because when I think of this person's name, I think of their body of work. It's sort of like freeing, versus like if you're an entertainer or a musician, you know, you're so much tied to your work. It's all about this right here. Like,
Yeah, we are lucky in that way, that it's not a physical, we don't always have to present a physical persona. um, but definitely I feel like, I guess what I was really meaning is that we have to be really sort of careful what we put out there, because it's such a wider audience of the whole world, especially on social media, is there to sort of like judge what you're doing and hold you accountable if need be. But you know, it's sort of just, it's just not something I want to. I don't, you know, I don't ever want to be put in that position where a bunch of people are like, you did this horrible thing and you're a horrible person, and people are going to remember it down the road and it's going to follow you. And I think in those ways, as artists and visual people, creative people, you know, those things can follow you around, because we're all trying to build careers and have lives, and it is all sort of intertwined.
I know, like talking about social media, I know Toban's on Facebook, but Neena, I don't think you are, because I tried to tag you and you didn't come up. But
Oh, I am. I just have it's just my first name, so
okay.
hard to find.
But how, I mean, have you like been more active on Facebook, or are you active, or how do you navigate through Facebook, or do you stay invisible on Facebook and social media?
I think I don't use Facebook very much, honestly. I think it's interesting, like the different social media platforms all have very different purposes, and like Facebook seems like it's so much about your identity. It's always like Neena and then like status or photo, or I guess I'm not huge on social media as a participant, but if I were to choose, I guess for some reason to me Instagram feels like the artist social media, because it doesn't really have to be about you. You know, you're just posting images of your world. And so it's like, I don't really love to be visible physically, but like, I'm happy to share my point of view with others.
And how do you navigate through like Facebook and Instagram, Toban, as far as your identity? And
I used to be very attached to Facebook, you know, obsessively so, and I've been able to really wean myself off of it much of the time. At this point, and for the last several months, I go to Facebook once a day, and I do whatever I need to do there. Like if I'm promoting an event like this or whatever, I do that then, and then I don't go back until the next day. And if I post something, I usually post it on Instagram, and then it flows over to Facebook. And I agree with Neena. I really like Instagram much more, because it's less. Well, I mean, there's less politics, which thank God. You know, that is just mind-numbing and horrible. But honestly, it is about the visual aspect. It's a place to share things that you want to see and things that you want to put out there, and you can really narrow your own feed down to just what you want to see. You know, I've got my Instagram feed so honed that I really enjoy being there now, and I don't enjoy Facebook a lot anymore. It's just, there's so much, and also I feel very aware of the way the algorithm edits Facebook when I'm there. I've noticed it in posts that I've made, and I've noticed it in posts of friends, and you know, you can feel yourself being manipulated while you're there in a lot of ways, and I don't like that. I'd rather be the manipulator than be manipulated. So, you know, I guess those are sort of my feelings about it. It's, I think Facebook is almost a necessary evil. Sorry, Facebook, don't deactivate my account. I know you're listening.
I wonder what the lifespan of these social media platforms will be too. Like Facebook and Instagram is relatively so new, and I wonder like what they will be replaced with. I feel that, yeah, like Toban, you said you just got an Oculus. There's so much potential for virtual reality right now. Like, you know, we could be having meetings in person. We could have a Thanksgiving dinner, you know, like over Oculus, that maybe feels almost just as real as going to your parents' house for Thanksgiving.
our animal avatars.
Yeah, honestly.
I mean, it is like that now. I mean, there are spaces inside the Oculus that you can go to where you're having a conversation exactly like this, a vocal conversation. You're looking at someone's avatar, and it's, you know, who knows where they are, but it's, you know, it is sort of I do wonder what's next as well, and also because I lived through the sort of Friendster era and the MySpace era, and it's like, you know, we're also invested in things like Facebook and Instagram, and it does sort of seem like, well, what's going to happen next? What's going to be the next thing where we all gather, and then are you going to have to recreate all this data you've created? You know, like Facebook and Instagram both are keeping track of everything we post and everything we do, and that's really evident in the memories section, which is terrible to look at. I hate it. But yeah, it's like, what becomes of all of this when the next thing comes along is something I think about a lot. Like, what becomes of all of your online person that they've collected about you?
There was an article, I tagged it, but I haven't had a chance to read it on Facebook, about just that, like what'll happen when Facebook and Instagram are gone. And, you know, will we all become invisible again? You know? And like, yeah, I mean, you know, it's interesting to imagine talking about invisibility. You know, I mean, Facebook and Instagram do make us visible in many different ways. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's a visibility that you choose.
Yes, that's true.
That's the thing that I think is important about it. There are so many things that happen to me on a daily basis, and in my head and in my life, that I wouldn't share socially. And if someone had a camera attached to their head that they couldn't remove, you know, think of the different way you'd be perceived online as opposed to what you choose to put out there.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In the prep meeting, we talked a little bit about judgments from our own kind of subcultures. So from gay subculture, from non-binary subculture, from heterosexual female subculture, as far as how we navigate and how we think about our bodies. I'm wondering, I guess, through what we've talked about now and kind of this community between the three of you that we've formulated, I mean, how do you look at it now? How do you think the relationships are, 'cause there are, between the different subcultural kind of perceptions or expectations?
Right, that did come up in the prep meeting, and I sort of felt a little. That was one of the things we talked about that I felt most vulnerable about, because, you know, I'm sort of hesitant to air the dirty laundry of my community and that sort of thing. And the sort of the same way, you know, you're hesitant to air your family's dirty laundry. But, you know, as a 50-year-old gay man, having grown up in, you know, in the 90s where I came out, and in that environment, I mean, I think specifically to people in my age bracket and sort of, you know, my level of experience, I find that gay men can be really, really judgmental and cruel to one another. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way they were treated when they were young. You know, the way, if we were tortured and bullied in school and as young people, you sort of carry that with you as armor, which you can use, but unfortunately, a lot of times it gets used in the wrong way and against the wrong people. And there's certainly a viciousness and a meanness and a hyper judgmentality that exists in the gay community, especially for gay males. And maybe that's the only thing I should be referencing. I can't speak for other members of my community, but it is something that I feel strongly about, and have done lots of times myself. You know, something that is easy to do is to make fun of others. It's really easy, and gay men in particular have a strange ability to be very clever and very quick. And that applies to that meanness too often, and it makes people laugh, but it never really makes the person that it's about laugh. And so, you know, I recognize that in myself. I recognize that it's a really not a great trait, and I recognize it as something that is very rampant in my community, and I don't enjoy that is something that we're sort of known for. I don't enjoy that. So thing that exists. I think that people should, I guess, having fun with someone is different than sort of just blatantly judging them and making fun of them and being really mean about it, as mean as you possibly can be. There's a big difference between that, and I think a lot of people would like to think, well, I'm just teasing. That's a big way to, I'm just teasing. And it's like, well, but where is that really coming from? Where does that come from? What is it in yourself that you are seeing in that person you're judging? I mean, it's a big topic, I think, a big topic a lot of people are not able to discuss or put into play. And so, you know, it's hard to talk about. It's hard to do anything about in the moment. You know, I have a large group of friends that I used to see a lot before this year. And, you know, it gets to be a bit of a mob mentality that is really, it can be really damaging and hurting. And you sort of, I guess I've gotten to the point where I go into situations with a large group of people with, like, you know, all my armor on, so that I am ready to deflect and you know, defend and that sort of thing. And it would be, that's not a feeling I get when I'm around other people who aren't gay males often, you know, and that's just something that is noticeable to me in those situations.
Thank you, Toban, for going there and for being so transparent. And yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know, my own experience is the same. The fact that I've done things that I wish I hadn't done, particularly related to body image with other heterosexual cisgender women.
Yeah, I almost see it as like, for me, I guess I like identify as gender fluid, but in a way I almost just, that's a way for me to not want to identify as a gender at all or be judged for in that framework even. You know, like these are all learned things. You know, nobody's born knowing what male and female is and all that. And it's sort of like so freeing to just be like a fluid being. Like I just would rather be judged for being Neena, you know, like I think of it like if you assume an identity, it's sort of like it feels a little static to me, at least. It can feel like you're like I don't know, like you're captured standing still versus like, you know, we're all like constantly moving. We're all very like fluid, you know, water doesn't like stay in one place or stay in one position. Yeah, I don't know.
I think, you know, being that hetero cisgender woman and being plus size, you know, there's a couple different things that I deal with. I mean, even, and as a feminist, I mean, there's even different feminist like subcultures, you know, that kind of, you know, argue against each other about, you know, the right way to do feminism or, and even like, I remember growing up, and I think this led to a lot of ideas about body image, but I had a friend growing up that, you know, she used to be like, oh my God, that woman should not wear stretch pants. They're not meant for plus size women, you know, and it's like women judge women like crazy. Oh my gosh, you know, it's crazy. And more like you know, I watch it and I become aware of it and I'm trying to, I don't know, I mean, you know, I'm also shy and I can't call it out at the time when it happens, but I want to be in a place where I can. But women are also, I mean, I don't know. And again, kind of like Toban, I don't want to speak for every woman, you know, but you know, they're competitive and yeah, I don't know, it's, you know, I think I can only be who I am and fight for what I believe in, or fight, you know, for, you know, the struggles of being plus size and, you know, my body in that space, my body as a woman through that space and what that means, and how I move through life, you know, based on who I am. And it's interesting. I kind of feel like I'm still figuring that out in many, many different ways. like who I am, because, you know, Toban was talking about armor, and like my fat has been armor for so long. And it's like, what is going to happen when I lose weight? How is my body going to move through space then? Am I going to be invisible because there's so many women out there, especially in Los Angeles, that are thin, and that, you know, we have that model culture, that celebrity culture out there. So, you know, sometimes I think a lot about that. Like, what is that going to mean, you know, if I'm thin, or even, you know, I decided I'm growing my hair out. You know, I shaved my head, you know, as a way to stand out, because I wanted to draw awareness to identity and to ideas that it doesn't, like, you don't have to, as a woman, you don't have to have long hair. Like, long hair is not your symbol. You know, it's like, I can have short hair just like men do and still be a hetero cisgender woman. You know, it, like, labels, you know, what is a label anyway? And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Kristine. It's so interesting to think about something that hadn't occurred to me. When you do change your body so drastically, especially going from a plus size woman to a thin woman, so going from something that's like not super accepted in our society to then being accepted, and how that may change how your body is perceived can also change how you perceive your own body. I found that really intriguing. I'm gonna let you guys talk 1 second, but I want to make one, because it's two, and we have a little bit of a lag between what we're actually doing live and what appears on YouTube. And so Monica and Lena have put in some questions, but I also want to invite other people, if they have questions, to put it in the chat, and then I can bring it in. But yeah, I find it super interesting to think about how that changes, because I think often we think about how the cisgender woman changes from being thin or normal, you know, average body weight, to then being plus size. But what happens when it's in the reverse? And how does that change your own body image, as well as how people are, now you're visible or invisible to them?
Exactly. And I think that also goes for, you know, trans, you know, I mean, for shifting genders. It's like, you know, I couldn't even imagine, you know, the changes and the awareness and the invisibility versus visibility, you know, for that.
Yeah, I can't imagine what that is like to sort of remake your existence. Yeah, it's a little unfathomable, honestly. And I wish we had an expert here to talk about it. I can think of a few I wish were here to tell us their story.
I think maybe that's another panel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because then there's also, I mean, little that I know is also that idea of, are you passing or are you not, and that kind of decision to change your body that drastically.
It makes me think about like generational visibility, maybe, like as our world is becoming more like global, people are moving around more, migrating. Like, I think about this kind of common thread, I think, in immigrants that come to the US. Like, my parents are immigrants from China and came here when they were around my age, in their late 20s. And, you know, their generation tended to be, you know, like, very keep your head down, you know, try to be invisible, just like it was very focused on survival. You know, it's a privilege to even have a job and a livelihood and to even make it in this country. And I noticed, like, this is a very common theme, that their children sort of like go the opposite direction. You know, if their parents were successful in creating a home and providing comfort and stability for their children, like me and many other people that I know and many other people that I, you know, follow and read, are just want to do the complete opposite and be so visible, you know, like, and be artists or be writers or be, you know, somehow like looked at. Just say like, you know, my parents are invisible, or like we are invisible in this country, and so like I want you to look at me now. I want you to like hear what I have to say. I want you to have to listen to both me and both my like the wisdom from my parents and just, you know, the things that I've come from.
Did you say there were questions, Nicole?
I opened it up to let people know that there could be, I tried to pepper in the questions throughout. Nobody has responded to any questions lately.
We've addressed everything. No one has any questions.
Nobody has any questions. Every single thing we possibly could.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we did. We even talked about the mask. We talked about shyness. We talked about being overlooked. We talked about, let's see. Oh, spaces. How spaces are designed. That was a cool conversation that we had.
I know with, yeah, when we were talking about that, like being a plus size woman, oh my gosh, like I think I told the story about, I was going to my therapy appointment, and the waiting room, this was of course pre-COVID, the waiting room had chairs that were tight. I could like barely fit in them. And, you know, I mean, I was squeezing in this chair. And, you know, I've encountered that before. Like there's a lot of like these hip restaurants out there with the small metal chairs. And it's like, really? They're so uncomfortable to sit in for a half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. You know, even like Bestia, you know, which is like this high class restaurant in the arts district, had these small metal chairs. And, you know, not, I don't, and who knows why, but so this doctor's office, the therapist's office, I mentioned it to my therapist. And the next time I went, they had got like, it looked like a toy chest that a kid would have in their bedroom. It was padded, but they put that there, you know, for people to sit on. And I'm like, well, it's a start. You know, I guess they did what they could in the time that they had. At least they listened, and I did feel heard, you know, which was a big thing. But you know, I mean, this conversation comes up in, you know, in airplanes, you know, the size of airplane seats, so many different, you know, doorways, or even car seats. I think I thought of this when we were having our conversation, but a year ago, I test drove a car, and I have kind of been eyeing this car for a long time. It's like a Hyundai, oh no, Kona, a Hyundai. It's like brand new. It's like just out the last couple of years. And I have a Hyundai, so they sent me, you know, like brochures about it. Brand new car coming out, and it's really cute. It's like, you know, I was excited about it. I'm like, okay, you know, I could be able to do this. So I finally went and test drove, and the steering wheel at its highest was like that far from my lap. And I was like so bummed. I'm like, really? I'm like, there's no way I could drive this on a regular basis. You know, so I mean, physically being plus size, my body in space, you know, I struggle with it for sure.
Yeah, it's almost offensive in a way, and I was thinking, I thought of this, the pre-conversation we had the other day, because we talked about this, and I went to the nurse's clinic last week because I had to get a shot, and the chair that they sat me in was this really giant chair. Like, it was a huge, extra wide chair. I mean, I'm not small, but you know, this chair was huge, and noticeably huge, and I sort of took notice of it. You know, as you sort of sit in one of those chairs, you put your arms on the, you put your arms on the armrest, and I was sort of like trying to do this, and I thought, why is this chair so gigantic? It's just a chair in a clinic. But it made me think of that conversation, because clearly that's a chair that they have put there for a larger person to sit in. And that's great. And their intentions are all good, clearly. But also I was sort of like, it looked like, it looked like a cartoon chair. It was just gigantic. I mean, I could slide back and forth in it with plenty of room. And I was sort of like, wow, this is really, I don't know. It just made me think about like, well, this clearly is here because they want people to feel comfortable, and they want to have people have a place to sit that fits them. And clearly this chair probably fits people, and it's why it's the size it is. But it just seemed really insane at the time that it was so large. And probably I was focusing on it more because I was nervous about getting a shot. But it just made me recall this conversation on our pre-tape that we talked about, and I was like, oh yeah, this is totally what she's getting at. Like, there just need to be spaces for everybody, and comfortable spaces, not just like a toy chest that like, here, sit on this toy chest.
Yeah. So this office chair is, if you could see it, it's like a big and tall, wide person because of my hips. I have gone through 7 or 8 office chairs in the last year, like ordering them, putting them together, sitting on them, the seat being too narrow, the seat sliding, the seat, like the hips too narrow. And then I'd have to take it apart, put it back in the box, and resend it. And so finally, I mean, this one, it's the best option. Now the arms are too wide. And the seat is okay, but it's not like at that cushion. But it's sufficing. But it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, trying to deal with that. Yeah.
That sounds frustrating. That sounds incredibly frustrating.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys have said, there's at least some acknowledgement of it, and hopefully they can move towards something that's going to work better for everyone. So it's like 2:15. I don't know if there's any kind of last thoughts that anybody has before we wrap up. We've gone all over the place, and I want to thank you for being so candid and vulnerable, and really genuine.
It's not always easy. I mean, I sort of expected to be a little bit more emotional.
I know, me too.
Especially because this morning I watched The Prom on Netflix, and that was a big emotional roller coaster all over the place. And I was like, oh, this is gonna set me up for crying. But it's been such a nice, healthy conversation, and so supportive, and all three of you have been so lovely to discuss things with. And I think that's really what's been so good about it, is that it's hard to talk about topics often, but when you've got supportive environment and people that you can put your trust in, it makes it a lot better and a lot more interesting of a discussion.
And even from when you first sent the email and invited me and asked for a photo, I had put up this picture. This was my invisibility, feeling unwanted and invisible that way. And I know there's a lot more that goes behind it. I mean, this is like ego, talking about ego and what we were talking about. And like just getting out of my own headspace and realizing it's not me, it's everybody lives in their own reality, whether it's visible or invisible. And, so yeah, it's like getting ego out of the way. But, it is a mental thing that, working through. And what does this mean? What does that mean I'm invisible? I mean, that's even a question right there. Sometimes I feel invisible and sometimes I don't. And so it's like navigating that is a whole other thing too. So, but I think since you asked us to do this, I feel less unwanted. So maybe that's why I didn't talk about it as much, but so.
Yay.
Yeah, this has been a wonderful discussion. Thank you all. It's really gotten me thinking a lot about like our agency and like our environment too. Like it seems like when we're talking about like how spaces are designed or how like even just like things are chosen to be visible or invisible, like I'm hoping that we can move towards just like having more input from real people. And I think we are. Like it seems that design processes are less just like centralized into like a small room of, you know, like homogenous people. It seems like the more we see into other people's worlds, we hear other people's stories, we're like expanding our notion of like what is possible for our environment.
Well, thanks again, guys. So to repeat what I said at the beginning, so this is the third in the Invisibility series. Acogedor is going to take a hiatus starting in 2021 for my own personal mental health. But we'll be back. I'm going to copy and paste the link again. Hold on. And somewhere I'm going to copy and paste that and put it in the chat so that if you want to sign up for our email to find out when we will be back, that you can do that. And then let's see. Oh wait, now there's, oh man, now there's all these other comments. So Monica says, from the perspective of hidden disabilities, do you think social media, especially now, helps level the playing field? I think we talked about that a bit. And then Monica, maybe I missed that one when it came in. Anyway, so Monica also says, this is such an important conversation. I hope there will be more. There will be, Monica, just not next month. And thank you for providing the space for this discussion. And Dee Weingarten says, this has been great. Thank you all for the gift of your time and allowing us to see you. And Georgina Lewis also says, yes, with 2 hearts.
Yay.
We'll close out with
Thanks
that.
for everybody for listening.
Yeah, we'll say goodbye to YouTube and close that out. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
joining.
everybody.
Bye.